Good afternoon. Greetings from Costa Rica, and thank you for joining me today. It's Friday, July 11th, and today I want to go over a quick overview of where the Costa Rica real estate market stands as of July here. We've got half of 2025 under our belt, and I wanted to give everybody just a quick update as to how things look. Today, we will discuss the 2021 through 23 post-pandemic boom and its effects. We're going to go over sort of the data that we can use in order to evaluate where the market currently stands. We're also going to obviously talk about how things are looking now, and of course, I will give some ideas as to where I think things are going to head from here. If you want to get in touch with me, folks, about Guanacaste real estate, my email address is matt@costaricamatt.com. Every Friday, I'm live on YouTube at noon Costa Rica time, discussing everything Costa Rica real estate related. So do be sure to subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and send me any and all comments, questions, concerns that you have. If you're looking for a valuable video resource and you'd like to answer your condensed or your questions regarding the process of buying Costa Rica real estate, taxes, other cultural questions and issues, you can get my V-book by visiting costaricamatt.com and smashing the big blue V-book icon, and there you'll be able to fill out a form and get my 20-chapter video book on Costa Rica real estate that has some of the most valuable information that I've put on my YouTube channel over the years. I did also want to mention quickly that I serve the areas that are really the Canton de Santa Cruz here in western Guanacaste, that range from Playa Potrero down through Junquial and even further south to Marbella. So if you're looking for real estate and evaluating any of those areas, including Playa Tamarindo and Grande, Langosta, Potrero, etc., do be sure to reach out to me. It'll be more than a pleasure to help you. Without further ado, let's start talking about the real estate market here and give some context to our discussion today. First and foremost, we need to understand what has happened in Costa Rica since the pandemic, especially if you're just signing on to my channel for the first time. Costa Rica benefited, or rather received, a huge wave of new people buying property here, especially in Guanacaste, the western province, right after the pandemic. You saw that thanks to the borders being shut down for most of 2020, the explosion of visitors that we saw in 2021 was abnormally large. Just like everywhere in the world, you had that revenge travel. Costa Rica was absolutely no exception. Tourism numbers from 2021 through 23 really greatly increased year after year, and you've seen millions of international arrivals. We were up above 3 million over the last couple years, whereas prior to the pandemic, the numbers were far less. The corresponding boom in real estate that followed was also supported, obviously, by the huge increase in digital nomad living and people's ability to work and live abroad. We saw huge numbers of families move down to Costa Rica after the pandemic, many of them reacting to lockdowns, feeling like they didn't want to live in a place where they'd ever be confined in a tight urban environment ever again. Obviously, we had a lot of people who, having been through that stressful lockdown experience, finally wanted to seize the day, make their dreams come true, and move to the tropics. And especially because in 2021, at that moment, the inventory in most places in Costa Rica of real estate that foreigners wanted to purchase was actually pretty tight, simply because you hadn't had a lot of construction happening in Costa Rica ever since the great financial crisis in 2009 and 10. Really, Guanacaste and most of Costa Rica had seen a boom in foreign investment leading up to 2009. Things really crashed then, and from 2010 until the pandemic, you didn't see much creation of new inventory. So when the borders reopened in 2021 and you started to see that flood, yes, there was absolutely some imbalance between demand and supply, and specifically for those communities that were ready to receive foreigners with private schools where you had good infrastructure and ready to go homes, turnkey, comfortable properties that felt sort of easy for foreigners to transition into. You saw so much more demand than supply that, yes, prices went crazy in some locations. You've seen online reports where people say that prices went up 400% in those years. That's an absolutely ridiculous, overarching generalization to make. Yes, there are some instances where specific neighborhoods and really the properties in, we're talking about exclusive gated communities like Hacienda Pinilla or Mar Vista outside of Flamingo. You did see some 400% increases over those years in the absolute top, most exclusive locations, but it was nowhere near a 400% increase in most places. And I could show you a lot of areas where real estate is priced almost exactly the same as it was because there was just not that huge influx of demand. So when you see that, yes, there was that boom and corresponding price increase, keep in mind it did apply to a limited number of areas, and that those extreme increases only happened in the really top communities that were in demand. So what data do we have to look at if we're trying to get an idea of where things stand here in 2025? One of them, I actually did a broadcast recently talking about data sources and what you can and cannot trust, because you do see some pretty ridiculous generalizations. People saying, oh, the market is collapsing. 40% of properties have had a price decrease, or these really big sort of assertions that frankly don't have a good data set to back them up, because in Costa Rica, we don't have a functional MLS from which we can just draw that data. A really good source of information that we do have available to us, and yes, I'm biased because I'm a member of this company, but the Coldwell Banker National Costa Rica data that's put together is one of the best sources of data, because Coldwell Banker is the largest real estate network in Costa Rica with 13 franchises. And comparing the data that those 13 franchises year over year is a very good source of information to compare 2025 to 2024, for example, because we have such a broad network. If we were only in 2 or 3 different markets, really we wouldn't have that variety of data that would support the consistency of information and the validity of what we're dealing with. But thanks to the fact that, yes, we're in 13 markets, really we have a good collection of information on especially with this foreigner real estate market. And to be clear, that's what I'm talking about here, is foreigners purchasing real estate and the trends related to that. So let's talk about where does the market stand and what does this data show. You have continued to see since 2024 into 2025 a cool down that definitely is the momentum coming off of that post-pandemic boom. Year over year, our 13 franchises saw declines in the amount of property that we've sold in every category. This data is from January through May of 2025. And if we compare it only to data from 2024, we saw a 10% decrease in single-family home sales. Luxury homes and condos both saw a decrease in the 40% neighborhood, and undeveloped lot sales properties declined by 17%. If you would talk to people in other brokerages, and I frequently do, you're hearing the same thing across the market. This slowdown is there. And absolutely, I feel that there's no way, given the frenzy of what was happening in 21, 2, and 3, that you would see that kind of momentum sustain itself into 2025. And I'm completely unsurprised to see this decrease in the volume of sales that Coldwell Banker is seeing nationally in Costa Rica. Where do things go from here? And a lot of people contact me sort of saying, well, there must be some real deals emerging. And is this a buyer's market? Are we about to see a huge buyer's market in Costa Rica? First, before answering, that question specifically, I want to discuss two pillars of our real estate market that fundamentally change how Costa Rica's this market that we're discussing reacts in different economic environments, or how quickly it moves in one direction or another. And first and foremost, we have to remember that for foreigners, this still does remain a cash market. You are seeing lenders, including Second Street, the one that I had on my channel here earlier, offering 30-year fixed rate mortgages to U.S. citizens. But by and large, this still does remain a cash market. And most people who own properties here, the foreigners who have a home in Costa Rica, most of them are paying their operating costs through rentals, and most of the owners are a bit, in the more affluent ranges of humanity, simply because this is typically a second property for them. They purchased it in cash, and so they're not people who are immediately in the most economically vulnerable category for obvious reasons. All of that I was discussing is essentially to say that a buyer's market here in Costa Rica, these foreigners selling properties, it never is going to shift into an absolute overarching buyer's market quickly, because everybody owns their property in cash, or the vast majority, because properties are paying their operating costs, and because the folks who are, the owners aren't in that, they're more affluent. You really don't get people in a huge rush to sell, even when sales slow down. Instead, what you start to see is an accumulation of inventory, and slowly but surely, yes, sellers will begin to lower their pricing. I do actually think a buyer's market is nearly imminent for certain types of inventory, and specifically, I want to talk about undeveloped lots. Remember when the post-pandemic boom was, I was discussing that and its effects. One of the things that I forgot to mention, I'm realizing, was that developers in those post-pandemic years from 21 to 23 started racing to create inventory. They saw what was happening at those locations like Hacienda Pinilla and Mar Vista. They saw that prices were tripling or quadrupling in some cases. And yeah, a lot of developers started running to create additional inventory. And specifically, I want to talk about one particular location where you've seen this effect. The corridor between Tamarindo and Huacas, really in the city of Villarreal and Huacas itself. This is a two-lane road connecting, two critical road junctions here. When you currently drive down this road, you see the gates for at least half a dozen brand new developments along this area, because this is the center, or really the epicenter, of expat demand in Guanacaste. You have private schools and healthcare here that have really attracted a lot of families and make it easy for people to move here. And as a result, you saw a lot of people who saw that demand in 21 through 23. They put two and two together and launched residential projects in this corridor. One of them is called Alma Verde. There's another one called Baulas Sunset Community with more than 100 lots. If we went south towards Avellanas, somewhere that I frequently cover on my channel, we'd be talking about Numandi, Ave Moana, a residential lot project that started in town, and now Pachote Hills. You've got 4 different developments in Avellanas. Those developments in the Huacas Villarreal corridor, on and on and on. Right now, all of those developers, having seen the demand and the post-pandemic demand and having now worked through the bureaucracy of starting their development, they're putting out their for sale signs. They've got their segregation done. They're ready to sell inventory, and they're the ones that currently are the most vulnerable to this market slowdown and its negative effects. I've seen several developers who went from an initial concept where they were only offering homes to now selling home sites as this transition has happened. And rather than the booming post-pandemic sales, they've had slow interest. They've also started even reducing their their lot prices in some cases to really try and motivate people to look at their projects. And if you're going to see a buyer's market anywhere in Costa Rica, and soon, it's going to be in those new developments where sales have not met the expectations of the developers. And as we approach these uncertain economic times in the second half of 2025, really those developers with, in some cases, 100+ lots are really going to be in a position where they need to start selling to recoup their investment. So as I will be talking about finding deals eventually again on my YouTube channel, but right now, if I were a buyer interested in investing in Guanacaste, you're still only occasionally seeing the sellers of homes or condos who have reached that level of real true motivation where you've got a fire sale or exceptional opportunity. Right now, though, I would definitely feel that I were in a commanding position as a buyer looking at one of these new developments. And if I were willing to invest in one of those unfinished, the developments where perhaps even the infrastructure isn't completed or where you only have empty home sites, I would greatly leverage the seller's motivation and really shop around to see what I might find, where some developers are going to be forced to give big discounts to start getting people in the door to their development. If you want, again, to know more about Guanacaste real estate and start looking at specifically the areas from Potrero down to Marbella, do be sure to send me an email to matt@costaricamatt.com. Greatly appreciate you tuning in today. I'll see you next week, again, Friday at noon, Costa Rica time. Appreciate you joining me, folks. Have a great weekend, and pura vida.